Prussia. The army with a state. The former March of Brandenburg and the Teutonic frontier of Prussia united into one state that would go on to define the history of Europe. This young Prussia was incredibly small compared to the rival of the Habsburg Empire, but due to great men like Frederick, Prussia's military tradition would allow them to punch upwards against any who would oppose them. After Napoleon's empire collapsed under the weight of the Allied forces, Prussia had gained a significant amount of territory in Germany by seizing the Rhineland. This industrial epicenter would transform Prussia from a small but powerful state to the dominant power in the German Confederation, and the most likely candidate to unite Germany under one banner. In our history, Prussia would go on to defeat Austria in the Brothers' War, before defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War. The Prussian king would be crowned Emperor of Germany, the Kaiser, in the Palace of Versailles while the war was still ongoing. This Germany was defined by Prussian militarism and shaped the fate of all Germans for centuries to come. However, in Aftershocks of the Revolutions timeline, Prussia failed to unite Germany. This is because, instead of the Frankfurt Parliament of 1848's attempt to unite Germany being stifled by the Prussians and Austrians, the Austrians accepted the crown from the gutter, seeing as their multicultural empire had collapsed after the Hungarians became independent and the Russians seized Galicia-Lodomeria. The reactionary nobility who defied the Frankfurt Parliament rallied under Prussia, who became the Kaiser of a rival German confederation. The Bürgerkrieg would wage on between the Habsburg and Hohenzollern confederations for 2 years until a peace was negotiated, leaving two Germanys, a liberal constitutional monarchy under Habsburg rule and a reactionary semi-constitutional monarchy under the Hohenzollerns. With two major German states desperately wishing to unite their people under their banner, and with an extreme ideological divide, would Germany ever unify again? Welcome to Aftershocks of the Revolutions Redux lore video number 3, The Rise of the Prussian Phoenix. I highly recommend you watch the AOTR lore video about Germany before watching this video, as it will skip over many details in order to make room for the fallout of the Great War and set the foundations for the Hearts of Iron 4 mod's start date. This video is also special, as it coincides with the developer diary, where we go into depth about our vision for Prussia's gameplay in Aftershocks of the Revolutions 2. If you're watching from the Reddit thread, hi! If you're wanting to see the developer diary, I will leave a link in the description. I hope you enjoy! The alliance that the Prussians had led against Habsburg unification efforts had, unintentionally, created a new nation, a federation defined by the different kings and dukes who looked to Prussia for its leadership in these troubled times. This federation even included the lands under the Danish king. Because the Danish king was ruling Schleswig and Holstein in personal union, he was a member of the German Confederation. He had even petitioned to join the North German Federation once it was ratified in our history. In order to ensure their grasp on the Baltic Sea, the North German Federation would invite Denmark in as a kingdom, including Schleswig and Holstein. Despite the North German Federation's best efforts to resist the liberal tide, they would eventually lose the Rhineland, which would join the German Confederation as a state of its own. While the loss of the Rhineland would be devastating for the North German Federation, they had managed to obtain a small colonial empire through Danish membership. Denmark's control of the Faroe, Greenland, Iceland, and several other small postings in the Caribbean, Africa, and India would allow for this North German Federation to gain a maritime, economic character, unlike the pre-unification Prussia of our timeline. Due to the Rhineland being lost, the secondary industrial center of Prussia, Silesia, became incredibly prominent. This interconnection between the international traders through Denmark's colonies, through the old Hanseatic cities to the north, and to Breslau via Berlin, the North German Federation would maintain a strong economy and a national unity, preventing liberals who may harbor sympathies for the Habsburg German Confederation to come to influence, entrenching the reactionary holdout in Germany. This stability allowed for the North German Federation to hold on, waiting for their next opportunity to cement their leadership as the true rulers of Germany. The perfect opportunity would present itself following the advent of the Luxembourg War. The Habsburgs had attempted to assert their legitimacy through demanding that the Netherlands concede the territories that they owned that were bestowed to the German Confederation proper, Luxembourg and Limburg. The Netherlands was not ready for war, so they peacefully conceded the territories. However, Napoleon III, who had been desperately waiting an opportunity to attack the Habsburgs, declared war, wishing to annex them into the western bank of the Rhine and legitimize his rule. While the North German Federation also claimed the western bank of the Rhine, they would invade Habsburg Germany as well, with their cited reason being the preservation of Dutch sovereignty. Despite the North German Federation's best attempt to keep up industrially with their adversaries, the Second Bürgerkrieg would be an unmitigated disaster for the Hohenzollern monarchy. France's Rhinish offensives quickly stalled and were pushed back. Even with the bulk of the Habsburg forces concentrated on their western campaigns with France, the eastern front of the war was described by many as being worse than any previous depictions of hell. Due to the bloodshed on both sides, and the fall of the French into anarchy, neither nation wished for the war to continue, and a status quo antebellum was reached. The North German Federation may not have lost any territory, but the Habsburg Germans had managed to solidify their claim to Luxembourg, Limburg, and now Alsace-Lorraine. The result would be utter humiliation for the North German Federation, destroying the miraculous harmony that had emerged 15 years earlier. The defeat of the North German Federation in the Second Bürgerkrieg caused massive cultural and political shifts within their society. The government of the North German Federation would rapidly move away from purely focusing on reaching economic parity with the Habsburgs, and rapidly began to shift towards further militarization. In response, the newly founded Spartacist Party of Germany, no doubt influenced by the rise of the Socialists of the French People's Republic, would begin to organize workers' unions in attempts to combat the increased militarization of the state. Tensions between the ruling Junker elite and the workers who supported the Spartacists would continue to rise, defining the politics of the era. Many feared that the militant Spartacists would trigger a revolution that would plunge the North Germans into yet another failed reunification war against the Habsburg Germans. But the odd alliance between the North German Federation and the French People's Republic would placate the militant socialists of their nation. This Franco-Prussian alliance was unprecedented and incredibly controversial, but it was also extremely fruitful for the two nations. The threat of a Republican revolution at home was miraculously quelled by the simple recognition of the French People's Republic. A second wave of the harmonious society of the North German Federation began, as the government was able to continue their militarization, unfettered by the now pacified workers' councils and unions. However, this was only part of a greater plan for a global socialist revolution. The Spartacists of Germany would be in constant contact with Paris. Their plan was that once an opportunity had presented itself, like another Bürgerkrieg between the Habsburgs and the Hohenzollerns, the French would trigger socialist revolution cells in both nations once they were able to support them, allowing for the revolution to spread to Germany. This German October would go unnoticed by the North German Federation and would continue to fester in this state as the Great War began. The Franco-Prussian alliance would grow to include the Russians, giving their alliance a much-needed manpower boost, as well as a guarantee to the North Germans that their eastern flank would no longer be a problem. This allowed the North Germans to focus all of their troops on their border with the Habsburg Germans. The Habsburg German Navy attempted to blockade the North Germans in the North Sea during the early stages of the war, but the North German Navy was able to keep its supply lines open. The North Germans were aware of the incredible weakness of the Habsburgs' Atlantic fleet, as they were restricted to a main port in East Frisia. A brutal offensive took place, where the North Germans would move to encircle the port and cut it off from land-based supply lines, preventing the Atlantic Navy from being able to reinforce itself, as the only other Habsburg-controlled ports were in the Mediterranean. In hopes to push this advantage, a joint assault towards the Rhineland by the North German Federation and the French People's Republic would be undertaken by both nations. In order to circumvent the extensive fortifications in Alsace-Lorraine, France invaded the neutral Kingdom of Belgium, which brought the British into the war in order to uphold the 1839 Treaty of London. North German control over the North Sea was quickly demolished as the British seized their key naval base in the Faroe and Iceland with no resistance, and a joint Anglo-German blockade crippled the North German economy. To add insult to injury, the Russian Empire's war effort collapsed as the provisional government sued for peace as the pro-war Bolsheviks under Lenin rose up against them. As soon as the Bolsheviks rose up in Russia, France's true motives were revealed for all to see. Once the Central Powers were defeated, the French would trigger the dormant revolutionary cells that they had begun planting in their allies decades prior. The North Germans quickly began storming these revolutionary socialist cells, which disrupted the Spartacists enough to prevent a Bolshevik-style revolution. Russia's exit from the war came as a shock to the North German general staff and government, as neither of them had predicted that their eastern flank would now be under threat, leaving them unable to mount a defense against the new Central Powers-backed Provisional Polish government to link up with a simultaneous uprising in Poznan and Upper Silesia. The North German Federation surrendered to the British. Soon after the North German surrender, an anti-war revolution in France quickly put an end to the Great War. Habsburg victory over their northern counterparts brought the ideals of 1848 back onto center stage, the unification of all Germans into a singular Germany. While some romantics wished for the Anschluss, or annexation, the Junker elite saw this annexation as an end to their privileged position within the state. They were joined, oddly enough, by many of the former Spartacist cells, who viewed the victorious Germans as the greatest threat to workers' rights now that their troops occupied Paris and worked to dismantle the former bastion of the revolution. The British, knowing fully that a wholly united Germany would eclipse their status as world hegemon, worked with the North German elite to push the peace negotiations further in favor of the North Germans, the final blow to 19th century honor. The final agreement reached by the Central Powers and the North Germans would see the North German Federation dissolved and replaced by the Kingdom of Prussia, and an independent Kingdom of Denmark that included Schleswig and Holstein. The Prussians also lost territory to the provisional governments of Poland and Lithuania, with Poland being granted Poznan and Lithuania being granted the Memel region. Thus, Prussia would come out of the Great War with these borders. Despite all that it lost, it remained independent from Habsburg domination, fomenting a new kind of Prussian nationalism that quickly began to rise through the ranks of government. This nationalism sought to regain the confidence of the Prussian people and state after the loss of their leading position in northern Germany, and to cope with the reality that the future of a united Germany didn't include the Hohenzollern dynasty. Frederick Wilhelm IV, insecure over the anti-Hohenzollern nationalism, would execute a bold plan in order to win over their hearts, a daring invasion of the young Polish state. The perfect opportunity for an invasion of Poland would present itself as the Russian Civil War spread into the land that the Polish government considered its own. The Bolshevik leadership refused to acknowledge any sort of treaty that the provisional government had made, and invaded Belarus. This nation was young and weak, perfect for the Bolsheviks to claim in order to reinforce the war effort against the provisional government. As the Bolsheviks occupied Belarus, they began to occupy parts of eastern Poland. This quickly mobilized the Polish into bringing their armies to the east in order to fight against the Bolsheviks, which saw them occupy Belarusian land as they advanced further against the increasingly overextended Bolshevik armies. With the Polish army occupied fighting a foreign invader, the Prussian king ordered an invasion of Poland to reclaim Poznan. Seeing the Poles busy with two separate enemies, the Lithuanians also invaded the Polish. This joint Prusso-Lithuanian invasion saw initial success, but with rising international support for the Polish, paired with a surprisingly powerful Polish army, the Prussian advance was repelled. Lithuania was brought down by a pro-Poland revolt that turned Lithuania into a Polish ally, and soon Prussia was under threat. This further humiliation, brought about by the fragile ego of Frederick Wilhelm, threatened the very existence of the Prussian state. Many began to fear that Poland would demand more land from the Prussians. This fear of further humiliation, the threat of a potential Habsburg intervention, and a socialist uprising, caused the previous homogeneous Junker elite to splinter between loyalist Junkers and patriotic Junkers. The loyalists would swear fealty to the king, believing in the divine right of their king being fundamental to the Prussian identity. The patriotic Junkers would rather see Prussia continue to exist, even if it had meant deposing their king. This division among the elite was also met by an army questioning the actions of their head of state, and they blamed the reckless invasion of Poland and the resulting humiliation on Frederick Wilhelm IV. Many of the remaining Spartacist elements that had yet to be expunged during the Great War's purges regained their resolve as the Republican coalition began to make its moves. The armed forces, patriotic Junkers, the Republican opposition, and the class-conscious proletariat were all united against the king. The coalition would issue the king an ultimatum, demanding that the king abdicate peacefully, lest he be forced to abdicate at gunpoint. Realizing his mistake, Frederick Wilhelm IV would accept the ultimatum and flee the country with his family. The new provisional Prussian government declared the Prussian Republic and sued for a status quo antebellum peace with the Polish. Poland accepted the unfavorable terms in order to quickly reinforce their compromised Eastern Front. With the monarchy deposed, the Republican opposition's goals had been achieved. The patriotic Junkers had managed to preserve their privileges and position in society, all while preventing a total Habsburg Anschluss. The solution, however, was far from perfect. The foundational document of the Republic, the Dresden Constitution, was extremely restrictive, as it had neither universal male suffrage or women's suffrage, one of the main tenets demanded by the liberal and social democratic elements at the Constitutional Convention. In an incredible twist of fate, the now stateless Hohenzollerns would see one of their own rule as the Tsar of Russia. Louis Ferdinand von Hohenzollern, son of Frederick Wilhelm IV and matrilineal great-great-grandson of the former Russian Tsar Nicholas I, became the most convenient candidate for the white movement to rally around after the Bolsheviks had summarily executed the royal family during the Civil War. This Hohenzollern Russia, home of the loyalist Junker exiles, holds ambitions to reclaim Prussia, if only to enact revenge on the patriotic Junkers. These ambitions would, however, remain as plans for the future, as Russia was weak in the aftermath of the Civil War, and it no longer shared a border with the Prussians. The largest of these so-called buffer states was the United States of Poland, a union of several nations proclaimed after the Polish had successfully defended Belarus from both the Bolsheviks and provisional Russian governments. The Prussian Republic would respond to this Prussian candidate in Russia by moving to establish friendly ties with the Baltic countries. These diplomatic talks would soon become the backbone for the Prussian-led anti-Russian, anti-Polish faction known as the Baltic Treaty Organization. This diplomatic and democratic Prussia, thanks in no small part to its continued hold over Friedrichshafen, revitalized its crippled economy even with the loss of Silesia, and repaired its international reputation, leading to the country's nickname of the Prussian Phoenix. As 1936 dawns, the president Otto Wels faces a nation on the edge of chaos. The Cherry Coalition was able to stabilize the economy during their mandate, but as new elections draw ever closer, it's unclear if the SDPP will be able to survive the alienation of its many working-class voters following the coalition's split. The Treaty of London continues to strangle its once proud military and military industry, but an ambitious plan to quickly and decisively mobilize the economy under the nose of the League of Peace could be feasible, if the rumors of secessionism in Bohemia and Denmark are to be believed. Externally, the Republic still remains as one of the most important countries in the Baltic, but its role as the region's sole arbiter is but a distant memory. The Finnish War of Independence has provided Berlin with an opportunity to weaken its Russian rivals' soft and hard power, all while increasing its own influence in the region. Similarly, the once dominant United States of Poland has begun to show cracks as its great unifier, Józef Pilsudski, slowly retreats further from the public, putting many in the government on edge. Will the young republic survive its internal threats? Will it be able to regain its position as the master of the Baltic, while also taking down the Habsburg giant? Will Prussian democracy survive? Or will the new pro-France national syndicalists snuff out the democratic experiment? Will Russia be subsumed into Habsburg Germany? Or will the Prussian Republic become the champion of German republicanism? You decide Prussia's fate in Aftershocks of the Revolutions Redux. Come join our Discord to stay up to date with development, or check out the developer diary. Both links will be in the description. If you're looking for more lore-related videos, please subscribe. Special thank you to everybody in the Aftershocks of the Revolutions development team, and for Jubs for helping me write this script. Shout out to Enzo Rafael Souza Silva, Balin Aura Universi, Louis Avant, Good, and Kaiser Gaming for being channel members. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to have your name shouted out at the end of my video, please consider supporting the channel by getting a membership. Whenever you're running a country, don't let the military get too powerful. I hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Please subscribe. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.